Hey, so I'm going to explain how the mirror principle in spirituality works. So the universe acts as a mirror to show you what it is you haven't incorporated into your own conscious awareness. So on a subconscious level, you still have whatever thing you need to actually incorporate and raise your level of consciousness and vibration. Now, this is known as the angle of incidence and reflection. So let's say you've got something like a mirror, and this, let's say this is a lake. If light hits it at this angle, it will have to match it when it is reflected. Okay, so this angle right here will have to match. This will be the angle of incidence, and this will be the angle of reflection. And this angle is determined by your subconscious. So whatever repeating patterns that you have stuck in your own head, like I'm not good enough, everything happens to me, not for me, then that will determine whatever angle this is. So let's say someone's operating at a different frequency than you, then they're going to hit the water at this angle and it's going to bounce back at this angle. So different angle. And this is also how we interact with archetypes that we call deities, because they're operating within a different dimension, a higher dimension or higher density of space and time. Because what controls which spatial axes you have access to is time itself. That's what distributes space. And this higher dimension operates a different flow of time, so they can match whatever angle your subconscious is currently at to reflect back at you what it is you need to incorporate. So this could be something from a hero, like a wizard would be the archetype of a wise old man, or it could be a deity from mythology in the form of Odin, Loki, Zeus, Juno. It doesn't matter. This is essentially how Hindu gods work: is they embody archetypes as lesser expressions of the all and source. Now I'm also going to, where's my sock? Where's my eraser sock? Here we go. Now I'm also going to explain to you how this actually works between higher and lower dimensions, how light and energy moves. Now there's something known as Snell's law, and this is essentially just explaining how refraction works. So when you put a pencil into water and it bends at a certain angle and it looks off, this is the exact same thing. This is just explaining that concept. So here is another angle of incidence, and then here is a angle of refraction and reflection. And this is the sine of the incident is equal to some sort of constant, which is n, and the sine, so the angle of incidence divided by the angle of refraction, you get n, which is a constant. And if you do this enough, now that was just one layer. Let's say there's a lot of layers. Okay? And with each layer, light or energy is going to bend to a greater and greater degree. So first one, then another angle, then another angle, and another angle, and another angle. If you do this enough, you're going to get a full curve. And this is what is known as, it's known as two things, a brachistochrone curve and a tautochrone curve. Brachistochrone is shortest time, and there is also a tautochrone, which is same time. This is how we solve the angle of fastest descent. So A and B, let's say there's a straight line and there's some sort of mass that's falling. Now we need to figure out what angle do we draw this at to get it, this massive object, let's say it's a ball, to fall down, and which one is the optimal path. This is how we essentially transformed a problem of mechanics into one of optics. And by we, I mean, what was his name? Bernoulli. He, famous French physicist. He had essentially turned a problem of mechanics, which is what people were originally trying to solve for optics, with trying to solve for light and energy and how it moves between different densities. And they found that it is this curve right here that is the optimal shape, something like that. It's not exactly right, but it's a curve that is essentially a point on the rim of a spinning wheel. Sounds a whole heck of a lot like the cycle of samsara and reincarnation. And the reason it's known as the tautochrone curve is because no matter where along this curve something is released, it's going to reach the end point at the exact same time. So if you release it from up here or here, both of these balls will reach this end point at the same time. And this goes back to the alpha and the omega, the end and the beginning. You're going from linear to non-linear time. So everything is meant to happen in its own order. At the whenever it's meant to happen is when it happens, because it's all in alignment. It's all going to reach the end point of time and space, which is us going back to unity, source consciousness, at the exact same time. Now let's see. Looking at my notes. Now we're going to have to talk about the principle of least action. And this was by Maupertuis. Yes, Maupertuis' principle of least action. And this is also explaining what flow is, what intuition is. So least action is mass times velocity and distance. I don't know why they put distances in S rather than a D. Doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, now if there is an increase in velocity, there needs to be a greater action, so more force, so that object can move faster. If there is a increase in mass, then, and this is for particles specifically, so this part is for light, and this part, the mass, is for a particle. If there's an increase in mass, there needs to be a greater force. If there's an increase in velocity, there needs to be a greater force or greater action to actually move the object. And if there's a greater distance, this is annoying me, then Looks like a dollar sign. Funny. And if there is a greater distance traveled within a certain amount of time, there needs to be a greater action or greater force applied to whatever it is, be it the light or the object. And going back to that little drawing I had earlier about the uh, different layers of reality, the A point and the B point, so the end and the beginning, well, the end and the beginning up here at the top, when going back to that little diagram, that beginning point would be source consciousness, would be God. And everything that, as light travels through different densities, through different dimensions, it refracts to a greater and greater degree. And it's actually able to move at a faster rate. But the particles that make up that reality are not as close together, they're more spread apart. So time itself will move slower. And the end point is when all kinetic energy, if we're going back to a problem of mechanics, is fully expended. So you're essentially going from pure potential energy, which is source consciousness, to fully depleted energy, to just all the kinetic energy is done. That's the end point of the universe, and not just like our universe, but higher and lower dimensions. Now, to explain the principle of least action in an example from the Veritasium video, let's say there is a ball that is 0.5 kilograms and it travels a total distance of first 3 meters per second hitting a wall. And again, in this example, there's no friction or anything like that. Now, let's say this ball travels 3 meters and then again another 3 meters as it bounces back, with a total of 6 meters as the distance for each section. Now, to do this, it's just essentially it's the 0.5 times the 3 meters per second times 6, which would get us 9 kilograms meters. Now, if you add, but that's just for one half. So if you do it again for this second half, you're going to get 18. Yeah, at some point. So let's also, now that is how you get the principle of least action, and it's also how you can actually calculate, when it was originally a sum, this guy, Euler, replaced it to a integral. So rather than it being something like this, a sum, he had changed it to an integral. Now what this means is that he's able to calculate uh, the action uh, while speed and direction are changing continuously. So this is what allows you to calculate the path of least action along the rotational trajectory of like a planet or something, as a planet orbits around a star. And this principle of least action, as I had already said, is the governing force of intuition. And as you go along your own path and listen to your intuition, you are being guided by the path of least action. You are conserving your own energy as your higher self is guiding you into a flow state. That's why synchronicities happen, where you just meet people. It's because you are essentially being guided by a higher dimensional version of you that can see things that you can't see from your linear perspective of time, and is what allows you to actually run into people or see these certain chances that you would have had no way of actually knowing. Now, how do we find the principle of, yeah, like plot the path of least action and actually find it? Is we do the exact same thing of when you would look for a derivative. Because the thing is, there's infinite paths from point A to B. So how you find it is you do the same thing for when you're trying to find a derivative, and that is simply this will end up looking like a curve, and this would be the path of least action. And let's say there's a slight deviation that we're going to call eta, and you see how this little curve overlaps right here? So let's say this is the path of least action, and you can go either this way or this way a little bit. This would look like you going along a path, your linear path of life, let's say, and there's a slight deviation of ups and downs, and eventually, you know, it'll level out. Unless let's say there's a huge deviation. And let's say there's something huge, like a huge one. Well, then you're going to have to go back and forth, and it's going to be a lot more difficult. This is essentially, let's say, a slight deviation would be something like you go to Target instead of Walmart for whatever reason when you're going to go shopping. A huge deviation would, let's say, you get into a relationship while you're still working through some sort of karmic cycle, or you end up with someone that there were some red flags and you ignored them, or you were looking to get saved from someone. So on a subconscious level, you're looking for that help. And then the universe has you meet up with someone who's going to take advantage of that. And then let's say you end up in a 3 or 4 year relationship that completely drains you. That would be a huge deviation. And it's not bad that you went through it. That might have to cause you to go on another path that will eventually get you to a similar point somewhere near here, but you're going to have to work through more subconscious uh, lessons and karmic blocks to actually get back onto the path that you're meant to be going on. This is your soul path. And or it could be, let's say you go and do a job and you think, oh, this is what I want to do. You go get a degree, and then you realize, shit, this degree is not for me. I listened to people that I shouldn't have, and I knew I wanted to be this. Like, let's say I wanted to be an artist or a math teacher, or I don't want to be a math teacher, but let's say you want to be an artist or a musician. And then because of pressure from like your parents or social pressure or whatever, you go to college and you get a degree doing something that you think is absolutely boring, like accounting or a doctor or something. Then that's a huge deviation, and you can either uh, listen to your ego, which is the part of you that was like, oh, I need to do this because blah blah blah, or you could have followed your intuition and gone on a much smoother path. But now there's a huge deviation that you've actually got to get back, and this would be the recalibration of your conscious and subconscious to actually get to the point that you originally wanted, which is what your soul is always trying to actually get to. And Let's see, what else? Something else. Oh yeah, that was it. Okay, so let's say we can see with the double slit experiment that particles are going to, oh, excuse me, I just ate a lot. Oh man, I'm full. So anyways, we can see that between A and B, particles are going to take every single path that could possibly happen to get from point A to point B. Now, if we, let's say, follow each path and time it. So let's say one of these, say you have a stopwatch timed for each of these really long swirly pathways, and you time however long it takes for a particle to go down one of these paths. And you've got little stopwatches for each of these. And you stop them whenever it gets to point B. And it probably wouldn't be more like that. Okay, so if we connect all these little arrows, then we like draw a square, and we actually square the results, we're going to get a certain level of probability. So the larger this area of probability, that is the most likely outcome. That's how your intuition works. So as you're being guided, and again, think of each of these paths as the multiple realities overlapping. And each of these paths is going to be a certain like one individual linear perception of time. And it turns out that most paths will actually deconstruct themselves because they're going to cancel out. And that's why we don't see those realities playing out. And what actually allows for us to view this kind of a linear perception of time and the probability is our intuition guiding us down the path of least action. So actually in the Veritasium video, he says, is there an intuitive way to understand action? Yes, there is. You just have to meditate or pray, go with the flow. That's it. You have to follow your intuition. That's the trick, is the intuitive way that you understand action is to listen to your own intuition. So if you're walking down the street and you get a sudden pull to, oh, maybe I'll go check out that cafe, even though you're planning to go somewhere else, listen to it. That's your higher self, a higher dimensional version of you going, hey, go there, go that way. Because you're going to run into someone or something, or you're going to have an opportunity present itself that you normally wouldn't have had happen. And yeah, that's all the notes I got for that. So this is essentially the physics of how the energy between higher and lower dimensions operates. I hope you guys found this video interesting and informative and you liked it, a little as scattered as it was. So be sure to leave a like or a comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want. And if you want to help me, I've got a Patreon and a GoFundMe in the description and probably pinned in the comments. So I hope you guys have a great day. Okay, I forgot the important bit. So the path of least action It simplifies down, like once you get to the most simple version of it, into Newton's second law, which is force times mass. The fuck was it? Yeah, that was it. Force equals mass times acceleration. Jeez. So anyways, um, force in this case would be a outside circumstance, like a tower moment or some sort of karmic lesson coming in that you're meant to learn. Let's say your house burns down, you get fired from your job. Uh, Someone that was in your life suddenly leaves, either due to extenuating circumstances or they die. That would be the force, an outside pressure applied to your subjective experience of life. Mass would be something like your karmic weight, the subconscious thought patterns that you have, the egoic identity that you cling to. And again, when I say ego, I don't mean this in like a derogatory, chiding way. I mean more so in the sense of like something that you've done to keep yourself safe, some sort of identity, like I have to struggle for work or I have to put in a ton of effort to get any sort of return on anything. That would be some sort of mass that is applied to your subjective experience of reality. And then acceleration is obviously how quickly you're moving through uh, life, but not in the sense of like the milestone is, oh, I got a house and I got a kid at like 23 and I've got a car. And no, that's not it at all. You can have all those things and have made absolutely zero progress on your soul's journey. Because again, the destination is actually going back to what we were talking about. It's to get back to source consciousness. How we were talking about how light will refract at different angles through different densities. Well, if we're down here in some third dimension and we're trying to get back here to source, the Godhead, then that means that anything external that you identify with as a mark of success, that's not it. That is of the world. That's not to say you can't enjoy those things. You can. You should. But that if you identify with that as a mark of your success, you're identifying with the body rather than the observer self of spirit, of you're not your body and you're not your thoughts. You're the thing observing your thoughts. So as you let go of mass through things like shadow work or meditation and you become aware of why you do the things you do and why you take certain actions and maybe ways that you will self-sabotage on an unconscious level, you will shed these beliefs or these identities that your ego is constructed to keep you safe. And as you do that, you're able to lighten your spiritual load, so to say. It's why people say walk lightly. It's why Alan Watts and poets and artists will say walk lightly. Don't like uh, don't focus on the material world so much because there's nothing to worry about. You're shedding your mask, so a greater force isn't going to have to be applied to get you to accelerate back to source consciousness. And I say back because, again, once we go from a linear uh, perspective of time in our third dimension, the past and future are ultimately all happening at the exact same time. That is the purpose of the alpha and omega point. This would be the alpha point, source consciousness, and the omega point at the bottom would be when all kinetic energy is fully expended. And this will eventually create, again, this is a two-dimensional representation, but in 3 dimensions, it creates a toroidal field. This is what the infinity symbol is meant to represent. The infinity symbol is just a cross section of a toroidal field. A toroidal field is just an electromagnetic field. Every being has one. Us, the earth, higher dimensional beings, and you exist right here in the present moment. And this thing that we see is a curved, like straight line. No, it just wraps around again right here. Every single moment is happening at the exact same time. So that's how we can apply Newton's second law to the conscious ascension of the soul and of the self. Well, okay, this time is truly it. Same thing as I said before. Check out my links if you're curious, want to help support me, and I'll catch you in the next video.